it is an extremely unpleasant feeling. It feels like death.
Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. Strange, inexplicable events are taking place in towns across the country.
The magic is back inside of me.
Outside New York City, a cop uses extrasensory powers to solve unsolvable crimes.
I do believe George is a psychic cop.
Are spirits of murdered inmates trapped in a former San Francisco prison?
In a place like that where there have been so many violent deaths, it's quite possible.
And a renowned psychic braves the destructive energy that remains in the cell block.
They're moaning. The pain is so intense.
4 art students from Boston are terrorized by an unknown entity.
I remember it as being a very bright, round sphere of light that had kind of a roiling quality to it.
And they claim they were subjected to heinous experiments.
They turned me over, and then they were doing some type of anal exam.
Workers at a Chicago nightclub are plagued with unsettling visions.
Next thing I see is a white tuxedo feature with reddish hair glowing beyond the bar.
Visions confirmed by psychics.
I get a sense that somebody's behind that bar, and it kind of feels like they are not alive.
And in Los Angeles, mysterious writing appears on photographs.
I have never seen an entity present itself in that fashion.
Could it be a spirit that inhabits the house?
Right over here, near the TV set, is where there's supposedly a dead body buried under the floor.
And we'll give you the complete wrap-up in our UnEx Report. Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. Our country is a hotbed of paranormal activity. The darkness of the spirit world may be responsible for a disturbing phenomenon. Los Angeles, California. Polaroids taken at the house of John Huckert and John Metkowski revealed something shocking. Ghostwriting. When psychic Peter James first arrived at their house, he was skeptical that an entity was using Polaroid film to communicate.
In all of my years of delving into the paranormal world, I have never seen an entity present itself in that fashion. But I will say that all things are possible, and perhaps this is something new that I have never encountered.
After visiting the house and seeing the pictures for himself, James is convinced.
Whatever is on the Polaroids, it is their way of saying, pay attention, this is how we're communicating with you. My experience here today clearly is telling me to convey to you that your probing here should be ongoing.
Peter left the house with several clues to the source of the haunting.
Well, one of the times Peter James was here, he suggested that we dig in the yard. I'll show you where. It was over here. He said that if we dug right here, we would find something significant.
What they unearthed was a long crypt-like object.
We don't know what it was for, but he was right. If we dug here, we'd get something.
Another one of Peter's predictions may explain the vortex he felt in the living room.
And I got that tingling sensation right now. And it's also very cold here. It's almost like one would stand on a foot massager and feel the energy coming in from your feet, through your feet, from the floor, and it's going through my entire body.
Peter James told us about a dead body that he claims is buried under the house. And in here is where the body supposedly is buried, right over here. Near the TV set is where there's supposedly a dead body buried under the floor. We've had a number of psychics come in, and they've brought in magnetometers and different kinds of instruments, and whenever you take it over that spot, it goes off the scale.
After the excitement of the investigation wore off, living with these ghosts became a normal part of life.
At first it was a little unsettling. I wasn't real comfortable because I didn't know what was going on. I would, you know, some of the things that would happen, you get kind of nervous or get a little frightened. But as you got, I don't know, through the years, you kind of get used to it, and it just becomes part of everyday routine, you know.
And then the photograph stopped. The entity known as Wright remained quiet for almost 2 years, until one day, a friend came over.
I guess I was a little curious, and I said, well, can you take a picture? And John says, well, we've taken pictures before, and it hasn't been around, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 years. And I said, oh, well, let's just take a picture of me and see what happens.
We took a picture, and next thing you know, it started talking again.
And all of a sudden, I see all these, as the picture develops, there's all these white lines all over my face. And we're looking at it, and I'm all like, wow, this is pretty cool. And all of a sudden, on the side of my face is the word try.
But this time, the messages were more detailed and more personal.
Some people have very unique experiences here, very personal experiences, and it has changed many people's lives. They've actually restructured the way they've approached their lives after experiencing what's going on in this house.
But no one's life has been touched more than Noel's.
And I did ask him if, you know, what he was. I mean, what are you? I mean, are you a guardian angel? You know, and he came back with the words, God's light.
And he talks about Noel a lot. Noel's very important to him.
It says more to me because I guess I'm the youngest of the three, and I probably had the most growing up, so it had a lot to do with just life in general, and it just would guide me in kind of like a spiritual way.
And it's supportive and friendly, and occasionally a little surprising and maybe a little frightening, but nothing I want to leave.
There have been many theories about why this is happening, but John and Noel have stopped looking for answers.
We've heard everything from ley lines to vortexes to energy streams that enable him to be able to do it at this particular location, whereas he possibly can do it in other places, but for some reason it's happening here.
It's so hard to explain. It's almost like something that you have to experience for yourself.
Later on Unexplained Mysteries, a paranormal encounter strikes 4 innocent campers from Boston.
It's this huge ball of glowing, pulsating light. And it kept just following us, coming closer and closer and closer.
And they claim aliens subjected them to horrifying experiments.
I remembered pressure, the heat of my physical body being ripped to shreds, like on a molecular level. It feels like death.
The New Jersey crime fighter with extraordinary powers.
Working with George is like working with a super cop.
Are the gruesome events of his past responsible for his gift?
I remember him brutally beating my mother. I think about that.
A Chicago nightclub may contain the ghosts of a tragic accident.
Then this building we're in now, which was one of the temporary morgues that had been set up for the victims.
A San Francisco prison houses the tortured souls of dead convicts.
There are at least 100 ghosts here, 100 entities that walk these corridors.
All that, and you'll get the final summary in our UnEx Report, here on Unexplained Mysteries. Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. The creeping fingers of the paranormal reach deep, even into America's tranquil countryside. Allegash River, just north of Boston, a chilling story of a mass abduction. Were all these men taken by aliens?
The beam coming towards us. I don't know what it's going to do. It makes me feel like I'm flying apart.
A camping trip forever altered the lives of 4 men.
We were just a couple of guys camping, fishing, and we were excited about getting out of the city and being in the wilderness.
Art students Charlie Fols, Chuck Rack, and twins Jim and Jack Weiner were looking for a break from the city when they set out for the backwoods of Maine.
The last thing on our minds was any UFOs or anything like that. We just wanted to go fishing. It was very, very dark. So we decided to build a fire so we could find our way back to our campsite. And all 4 of us climbed in one canoe with our fishing equipment and headed out into the lake. We were out there for approximately 15 or 20 minutes fishing with no luck. And suddenly Chuck Rack said, "Hey guys, That's a heck of a case of swamp gas. And we turned around, and probably 150, maybe 200 yards away at the most, coming out of the trees was this huge ball of glowing, pulsating light.
I remember it as being a very bright, round sphere of light that had kind of a roiling quality to it. It was yellow-white in nature.
And at that point, we started paddling very quickly towards the shore. As I was paddling, I was looking over my shoulder to see where this object was in relation to our canoe. And it kept just following us, coming closer and closer and closer. I was in a panic, to be honest with you. A second later, it was right on, almost on top of us, with this beam coming across the water right towards our canoe. And I remember thinking, well, we're not going to outrun this thing. There's no way we're going to outrun this thing. And then the next thing I remembered was standing on the beach.
Back at their campsite, the roaring fire had burnt down to embers.
Elapsed time we thought was 15 or 20 minutes, tops. And we couldn't understand why the fire had burnt down so soon.
None of the men could account for the missing time, nor were they ready to discuss what had just occurred.
The four of us were just left there standing on the beach in total silence. We didn't really even talk to each other. I guess we were in shock.
Little mention was made of the incident for 12 years, until strange dreams began to torment the Wieners.
And then I would wake up and I would be drenched in sweat and my heart would be beating really fast.
I started having nightmares about being in some room or some area with these strange creatures around us.
I said, I can't believe you're telling me this because I've been having the same dream.
A psychiatrist evaluated the twins and referred them to UFO researcher Dr. Ray Fowler. Only after agreeing to hypnosis did the brothers begin to recall their shared experience. Here are actual recordings of the session in which all four men from the expedition relived their experience.
The beam is coming towards us. I don't know what it's going to do. It makes me feel like I'm flying apart.
Each of their individual accounts depicted the same harrowing details.
Had no idea where I was. Then I realized that the three guys were sitting to my left on this bench, naked. All I knew is I was in a strange place, laying naked, paralyzed with this thing coming towards me.
I remember these creatures examining my brother with a type of wand.
The next thing I remembered was they turned me over, and then they were doing some type of anal exam.
I remembered pressure, heat of my physical body being ripped to shreds, like on a molecular level. I mean, it's the only way I can verbalize it, but it is an extremely unpleasant feeling. It feels like death.
I think that the Wieners opened Pandora's box because now they have questions about reality that they never had before. They have questions for which there are no answers.
To eliminate the possibility of a hoax, Ray Fowler arranged for a polygraph test to be administered.
After administering the examinations, there's absolutely, positively no doubt in my mind that they are being absolutely honest with me when they tell me that they were confronted by a phenomena in the Allegash region.
One person might fool a polygraph examiner. You have four all passing the tests, and the polygraph examiner being convinced that all four are telling the truth is very important. I feel very strongly that what they described is a real experience.
But to these men, the trip up the Allegash was only the start of an ongoing journey.
It's not over. This is an ongoing thing. We're tagged. Well, what can I do? Go hide? They're gonna find you.
Coming up on Unexplained Mysteries, a Jersey cop cleans up the streets.
No, I'm right. I get paid to be right.
And uses his psychic intuition to track down a killer.
And I talked to him. I got sick to my stomach. I knew he was the killer. I knew I was going to get him.
Nightclub workers in Chicago experienced disturbing sensations.
I truly believe there was something going on here. I smelled the most horrible stench of just death, rotting flesh.
And a prison in San Francisco where tortured souls can't escape.
Sounds of the cell door closing, somebody appearing and then disappearing.
That there is an energy here unlike any other that I've ever experienced.
Then we'll give you the final rundown in our UnEx Report. Stay tuned to Unexplained Mysteries. Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. It happens in small towns and the big cities. Suddenly, without warning,
Here it is.
or slowly under the cover of night, nowhere in America is safe from paranormal phenomena. Just across the river from New York City, the police are known for their intuition when it comes to solving crimes. But Detective George Brejak's powers border on the paranormal.
Working with George is like working with a super cop, and you have like a human lie detector right next to you.
I do believe George is a psychic cop. He just knows. He sees things that other people don't see.
Brejak grew up here when the city was a much safer place to live.
It's my city. I know the streets. I know the people. I know what the people think. My city.
Over the years, the city changed. The mills closed down in the 1950s. People lost their jobs. People like George's dad, who took his frustrations out on his family.
I remember him brutally beating my mother one night. I think about that maybe that's the reason why I was given this gift.
After seeing what his mother went through, George now dedicates his life to protecting others.
Lieutenant George Brejak brings to fruition those many gifts that God has given to him. That creates power.
No, I know I'm right. I get paid to be right. You're getting something.
George was good at his job, but it soon became apparent that he had a special talent for sniffing out criminals.
It's crazy because I'll be driving down the street like this and something will tell me to make a left turn, and I'll make a left turn, maybe go down a block or two and get somebody with a pocket full of dope.
Brejak discovered his gift over 30 years ago, working on a case that had detectives baffled.
Never forget, it was November 2nd, 1979. We had a homicide in the city of Patterson where a 7-year-old boy was missing for like 3 weeks.
As officers scoured the city, George was assigned to a stretch of railroad track. At first, he found nothing.
We went to leave. I actually got in the car, like you see on television. I put the key in the car, and something told me, go check the wooded area across the railroad tracks. After leaving the car, I got sick to my stomach, I got upset inside, and I knew I was gonna find the little boy's body.
He did find the boy's body. Under a piece of plywood. 2 weeks later, the killer was put behind bars. This unique gift was quickly noticed by his colleagues.
Yes, you get an instinct. I get instincts. With this man, certain things, he gets a natural instinct.
Sometimes it like bothers you to think that, like, why is it you? Like, why do you have this thing about you? There was a time in Patterson where I think I solved 3 or 4 unsolved homicides in 6 months. It was crazy.
One of the most famous cases that Brejak worked on was fueled by childhood memories of his father's abuse. It involved a 24-year-old woman named Candy Austin.
You'd have to say her family was like the Norman Rockwell all-American family. The little house with the picket fence, and just by fate, Candy Austin met John Short, and it became a nightmare for Candy.
From the outside, it appeared as if their marriage was perfect. But Candy's friends sensed something was wrong.
My first instinct when I met John was I just didn't think he was the right man for her.
What Candy wasn't telling anyone was that John was beating her. The violence got worse until one tragic night at the Willowbrook Mall.
He wanted to talk to her about getting a divorce. They argued.
he became physical with her and inadvertently strangled her. I don't think that he meant to kill her, but then he panicked and put a screwdriver through her abdomen.
Desperate to throw the police off his trail, John called his father-in-law and told him that Candy was missing.
He says to his father-in-law, which was a key word, let's go look for her, meaning you and me. Not, I'm gonna go look for her, let's go look for her. He wanted the father with him. And he says to the father-in-law, you know what? He said, let's check the Willowbrook Mall.
John led his father-in-law to the mall, straight to his wife's car.
He runs to the car, John Short. He said, Dad, the door's locked. He tried the door. Give me something to break the window with. So the father-in-law gave him a hammer. He comes back to the car, very excited. He smashes the glass.
John Short's act worked. The crime looked like a senseless killing. And for the next 6 years, it looked like Short had gotten away with murder. When George was handed the case, he felt an immediate connection to Candy. She reminded him of his mother, and he was determined to find out who killed her.
I took that file to my camp and read it for 3 days and come back and told my chief. I said, I'm gonna solve that murder, chief.
George tapped into his own childhood memories to form a psychic profile of the murderer. It all came back to one thing.
I knew inside of me that the father had something important to tell me. And 2 days later, I called him and I said, Fred, meet me by the Tic-Tac Diner on Route 3, I want to talk to you. He was like startled because I knew he had something inside of him to tell me. And what made me feel good about it at that point was that this thing inside of me still worked. He says, I'll never forget it. He says, I see my daughter's body every day of my life, the way it was found. He says he had to know the car was there before we got to the mall.
This was all George needed to know. It was now time to question John Short.
And I talked to him for a few minutes. I got sick to my stomach. I knew he was the killer. I knew I was gonna get him.
All of George's psychic intuition led him to the murderer. He was able to break through the lies and uncover the truth. 7 years after Candy's death, John Short was arrested for his wife's murder. It was a day George will always remember.
I said to my chief, I said, this is great. I said, man, the magic is back inside of me. And when we arrested him, it was like the greatest high of my life.
George doesn't know where his unique gift comes from.
That's right, and don't forget it.
He doesn't analyze it or question it. It's just what he does, who he is, and if it helps him solve one more crime, that's all the proof he needs.
And I really thank God for the gift that he has given me, because this is the perfect example how this gift works. When I leave this earth, my mark is here. I did what I had to do.
Next on Unexplained Mysteries, a Chicago nightclub appears to be the home for spirits of the dead.
I stopped for a moment and I was just this really small voice just crying.
Psychics summoned to investigate make an alarming discovery.
Would this at one time have been a place where there would have been bodies or something?
In the Bay Area, one of the most brutal prisons in the world.
Men were kept chained down there.
It's really dark and it's very cold in there, and I got the chills and I had to leave. I didn't like it at all.
I'm feeling that if I stay here much longer, that I'll die.
And we'll bring you our final comments in the UnEx Report, here on Unexplained Mysteries. Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. Just because you might live in a big city, don't think you're safe from the paranormal. Chicago, Illinois, the Excalibur nightclub attracts a daring and unusual crowd.
It's a very underground club. A lot of the people that hang out in the club, they're into the occult, the darker aspects of the club scene definitely hang out here. And I'm sure a lot of that is due to the energy that's in this room.
Some believe that this energy is the evidence of a haunting that has been experienced by everyone who works here.
What we do before the club opens at night is just kind of run upstairs and do a bathroom check. And I ran up there and I ran in there and I actually thought, I was like, haha, I'm all alone, maybe I'll see a ghost. And went to wash my hands and I had heard crying, and at first I was like, what is that? And I stopped for a moment, and it was just this really small voice just crying.
I saw something right behind this bar. I walked in to shut the lights off, and next thing I see is a white tuxedo feature with reddish hair glowing beyond the bar. I looked one more time to make sure, and it was gone. There was nothing there.
I had one experience. I smelled the most horrible stench of just death, rotting flesh that I've ever experienced in my life. It was almost made me pass out. It was so intense.
I truly believe there is something going on here. What it is, I don't know.
At the Excalibur, the key to the mystery can be found in the building's tragic past. 1871, the Great Chicago Fire. Half of the city burns to the ground. Among the buildings destroyed was the Chicago Historical Society, which stood on the site of the Excalibur. 44 years later, a pleasure outing on the Chicago River turns deadly.
The Eastland disaster occurred on July 24th, 1915, when the Eastland, which was a excursion boat, capsized in the Chicago River, and the 2,500 people on board, about between 800 and 900 people died. And there's also been some speculation that after the Eastland disaster in 1915, that this building we're in now was one of the temporary morgues that had been set up for the victims.
Could the strange activity at the Excalibur be linked to these two disasters? The club owners call psychic Jorianne Defray and paranormal researcher Peter Moscow to investigate. Immediately, Jorianne starts picking up telepathic impressions.
In this area, my chest is actually feeling pretty heavy, and I had heard a sense of watching out for the bodies before. Would this at one time have been a place where there would have been bodies or something?
Well, when they had the big naval disaster in the Chicago River, the Eastman,
yeah,
the cruise ship capsized, and there were hundreds of people that died. This room was used as a temporary morgue.
Oh, this room was? Oh,
yeah.
Great, okay. Getting a sense that somebody's behind that bar, and almost like, I don't know, doing some kind of serving or something else to somebody else that's out here. And it kind of feels like they are not alive.
One of the managers had an experience where he saw a bartender in a white tuxedo.
Good deal.
With reddish colored hair.
You got it, Peter? Got something?
It flashed just as I turned around here, right into this area.
Oh, good deal.
As I turned around, it went from about a 4.5 to 5 all the way up to the 15 on the dial there. So right in this area here, I believe you're going to find who you're looking for.
Yeah.
There was a tremendous burst of energy.
A few moments later, Peter's camera goes off by itself. The resulting photograph is startling.
Clearly, there are some abnormally strange streaks of light in this, which I cannot account for. I think it's the barman that triggered this abnormal photography.
I thought it was fantastic that the camera had gone off by itself and that we had actually picked up energy on the photograph.
Jorianne and Peter confirm what the employees of the Excalibur have sensed. The spirits here are not evil. They are lost souls born of the city's darkest moments. All they want is to be remembered. Coming up on Unexplained Mysteries, we'll take you on a tour of one of the toughest places in America.
Men were kept chained down there.
I'm feeling that if I stay here much longer, that I'll die.
Does a killer still stalk these corridors?
Joseph Kretzer. He was one of the toughest of the bunch.
Joseph is keeping me captive here. Joseph is placing me here against my will.
And a psychic's encounter that seems to have brought the suffering back to life.
There could not be any crime in the world worth the punishment that I feel this entity endured.
And we'll recap all the facts in our UnEx Report, here on Unexplained Mysteries. Unexplained Mysteries, Paranormal America. Strange incidents have taken place in some of the most historic places around the country. The cold, shark-infested waters of San Francisco Bay. And at its center, Alcatraz, the Rock, the most imposing American prison ever constructed. It was home to some of the most dangerous criminals of the 20th century. But when this fortress was built, it wasn't a prison. It housed soldiers stationed here to protect the city.
It was intended to be used as a defensive point. There was a gun that would have been mounted here, but it never got used. Instead, this was turned into the first cell block on Alcatraz in 1863.
As a military prison, Alcatraz was known as the most brutal place to serve time. Prisoners were chained to the walls, beaten, and forced to do back-breaking labor. By the 1930s, Alcatraz was turned into a federal penitentiary to house gangsters. For the next 30 years, this was the final stop for criminals who were too violent and dangerous for the normal prison system. In 1963, the prison was shut down. But some say the spirits of the men who endured the brutality of the Rock are still here.
When you walk in, it's really dark and it's very cold in there, and I got the chills and I had to leave. I didn't like it at all.
Normally I don't believe in ghosts, but in a place like that where there have been so many violent deaths and the kind of people that were there, you know, it's quite possible.
But the organization that maintains Alcatraz refuses to comment on the possible hauntings.
The official policy about ghosts on Alcatraz is we would say that, in effect, well, maybe things had happened, maybe they didn't. It's just something that it wasn't officially sanctioned.
To determine whether or not Alcatraz is haunted, psychic Peter James agreed to spend the night on this desolate island. Although he has been investigating haunted sites for years, nothing had prepared him for what he was about to encounter.
Alcatraz was a place that drove men mad. Military prison.
They're in pain, and I'm in pain, and there's blood here.
They couldn't break out of the prison.
There's trouble on the Rock.
The voices of 100 tortured souls echo in Peter's brain. Peter continued his investigation, exploring every inch of the island.
My feelings are strongly that there is an energy here unlike any other that I've ever experienced.
Ex-guard and Alcatraz historian Al Bloomquist agreed to review Peter's psychic impressions for accuracy. One episode brought back chilling memories.
And I feel like I'm being trapped here in this particular area.
We were told there's trouble on the Rock.
On May the 2nd, 1946, 6 inmates with other lesser accomplices decided to blast their way out of the prison.
I feel like I'm being thrown into this cell and I'm being thrown into that cell.
During that time, they gathered up 9 officers, put them inside of cells to be used as hostages.
I am a person of authority. I feel like I should be on the other side of this of the bars, but I'm here against my will. I am here by I am placed here by force, and at the point of the gun, there's that Joseph is involved here.
Joseph Kretzer, he was one of the toughest of the bunch. He was really a mean dog.
Joseph is keeping me captive here. Joseph is placing me here against my will.
Kretzer took the .45 automatic and started shooting these officers, innocent officers inside the cell.
I'm sensing that Bill, or William, lost his life here.
William Miller later died in the hospital in San Francisco. Other officers were very seriously wounded.
The name starts with a C.
Cecil Corwin had his lower jaw torn away.
It's a wonder they weren't all killed in the spot, because they were in there in massive humanity, and here these guns firing into that cell. You could tell what kind of a person this Kretzer really was when he had to do a thing like that.
When the military arrived to put down the uprising, Kretzer and the other inmates fled to a utility corridor in C Block. Peter follows the psychic trail of the doomed prisoners.
Joseph, I'm coming through. March, Marty, Marv. Give me a better verification of a name. Marvin, is that Marvin?
Marvin Hubbard died in the utility corridor of C block.
Oh, there's I am responding to a sensation here, and I feel like I'm losing consciousness. And what Joseph is telling me is that he's been shot.
Joseph Dutch Kretzer died in the utility corridor of C block.
Oh, it's cold. It's freezing back here. There's a cold spot here. Oh, yes. Hello? There is the third soul here with the letter B.
Bernard Paul Coy died in the utility corridor of C block.
Listen, they're moaning. The pain is so intense. They're like little boys back here. They're moaning, almost asking for the guidance of their parents right now.
Peter James leaves Alcatraz with a new appreciation for the horror that went on here. Decades of violence, death, and despair, forever imprinted in the walls of this cold, dark prison.
There are at least 100 ghosts here, 100 entities that walk these corridors, looking for a way out, looking for that life force that they seem to have lost somewhere, tragically.
I can't really say that I'm a believer myself, but like many people, I guess there are some things that just simply are unexplained.
Next, the UnEx Report. We'll give you the last word on America's most paranormal. The house in Los Angeles, where ghosts communicate with the living. The campers from Boston who claim they were abducted. A New Jersey cop who solves murders using psychic powers. Spirits of the undead stalking a Chicago nightclub. The souls of violent men that seem to be locked in Alcatraz. All this and more when we give you the UnEx Report. Next. And now, the UnEx Report. How can we explain the paranormal events happening all across America? Are there perfectly rational explanations for the circumstances of these extraordinary tales? Or are they simply cases of wishful thinking? These stories are undeniable evidence of the paranormal phenomena. Outside of New York, a cop uses his psychic powers to find criminals and solve crimes.
I think I solved 3 or 4 unsolved homicides in 6 months. It was crazy.
He just knows. He sees things that other people don't see.
4 campers from Boston are chased by a strange white light.
The last thing on our minds was any UFOs or anything like that. We just wanted to go fishing. And it kept just following us, coming closer and closer and closer. I was in a panic, to be honest with you.
And to this day, they claim to be plagued by disturbing shared memories of an ordeal aboard an alien craft.
All I knew was I was in a strange place, laying naked, paralyzed with this thing coming towards me.
I remember these creatures examining my brother with a type of wand.
In San Francisco Bay, the spirits of violent criminals may still lurk in one of America's most notorious prisons.
There is an energy here unlike any other that I've ever experienced.
Workers at a Chicago nightclub say they experience eerie sensations.
I went to wash my hands and I had heard crying, and at first I was like, what is that? And I stopped for a moment, and it was just this really small voice just crying.
I smelled the most horrible stench of just death, rotting flesh.
These feelings may be linked to the walking spirits of the victims of a horrible accident.
The Eastland capsized in the Chicago River. This building we're in now was one of the temporary morgues that had been set up.
Ghosts found a disturbing way to communicate with the living in this Los Angeles house.
whatever is on the Polaroids, it is their way of saying, pay attention, this is how we're communicating with you.
Some of the things that would happen, you get kind of nervous or get a little frightened.
Then, a psychic confirms an ugly secret that may be at the heart of the haunting.
I got that tingling sensation right now. And it's also very cold here.
Right over here, near the TV set, is where there's supposedly a dead body buried under the floor.
But the residents have learned things from their ghostly tenant.
And it just would guide me in kind of like a spiritual way.
Some people have very unique experiences here, very personal experiences, and it has changed many people's lives.
Across America, paranormal events shock, frighten, and inspire people in towns like yours every day. But are these events real? Is there a reason for them that can be found in nature or deep in the human mind? These are crucial questions, but for now, they must remain unexplained mysteries.
It's not over. What can I do? Go hide? They're going to find you.
We knew that we had a serial killer out there. To what degree, we didn't know.
And he had the most ghastly, awful smile of anybody I've ever seen. The guy kind of radiated evil.
He wanted to go down as the greatest serial killer ever.
Crime Stories, tomorrow at 8, only on Bio. True story.